So that video was kind of awful. It gives you the default name and password, obviously pointing out that many people will just continue to use the default name and password. There was a passing mention that you really should be going to a VPN or something, but not like he understood that that was really important. It's just what they might be doing. And if you looked on the internet, I looked a couple of years ago, you can use Shodan. Shodan is like Google, but instead of indexing the content of pages, it indexes the banners of the servers. So you search for services and port numbers and version numbers and such, and I found 81 DRAC systems connected directly to the internet. I didn't try logging in to see if they had the default password, because that would be illegal, but certainly you can spot how many systems are connected directly to the internet. And the latest big data breach that I've heard over the last couple of months is Mongo. Mongo is a new database, very popular, and it tells you in the documentation, just like all these Internet of Things devices, it tells you never connect this to the internet. It's too insecure. But a ton of people do. They found like 27,000 of them connected to the internet. And the thing about Mongo is by default, it has no password at all. So anybody can just go in and take all the data, and people have been doing that and finding, I think, 1.3 billion records so far of stolen data from those databases and so on. This is why, people say, I don't use online banking, I do everything with paper, and I say it's not going to do you much good because the company you give it to is probably doing something stupid like this, just sticking it on some database server, sharing it with the whole world by accident. This tends to happen. It's the problem with all forms of security. Every link in the chain is a way it can leak out, and that's why I said the military has to buy stuff with this certification that means that we really have checked the security at every step of the chain. Where did you get the components? Where did you get the programmers? How did you give your staff a background checks and so on? All the things that could go wrong, have you really checked to make sure those things are not going wrong? All right, so here's another article claiming that many other systems are vulnerable and that they're almost all connected to the internet because that's why you get network-controlled systems, so you can control them from far away. All right, in 2011, the DHS was informed, people complained to the Department of Homeland Security that all these SCADA systems running critical infrastructure like aircraft, control towers, and nuclear power plants were a risk, and the DHS sprang into action to explain that these were not bugs, these were design flaws, and therefore not their job to do anything about it, so they're going to ignore it. So this is mostly what you get out of the DHS in my experience. I think no one understood why the DHS was created. It was just a political stunt so George Bush could appear to do something about 9/11. And then everyone said, why are you here? We already have the FBI and the CIA and other groups, and what exactly are you adding? And no one ever knows why they're there or what they're doing. All right, and then of course your cell phones, your smartphones, and I guess PDAs, if those still exist. Your smartphones pretty much replaced them. You can hack the phone. You can put malware on the phone that records the conversations nearby like a bug. The recent dump from WikiLeaks shows what, if anybody didn't know already, the NSA can totally do that. They can turn on the microphone so they record everything said near it. Of course, they can copy all the data on the phone and the emails and photographs and SMS messages. That's easy, and banking Trojans do that all the time, although not usually on iPhones, mainly on Androids. So I say anything your phone can do, they can clone your phone to make a copy of it and make long-distance calls on your account, but that's probably the least damage because that's pretty easy to get back your money from the phone company. What's much worse is copying your phone data, and then the banking Trojans specifically capture the SMS messages so they can defeat two-factor authentication. They can catch the SMS and log into your bank account. You can buy cell phone rootkits. There are commercial versions. Bosses buy these to put on their employees' devices. Parents can put them on their children's devices. You can put something on your kid's phone that will tell you where they are and how fast they're going and what they've been sending in their email and everything else. So it's legal to make the stuff, and of course, once it's made, it could be used by people for nefarious purposes, and there are criminal versions not sold in normal retail shops that don't even make any pretense of having a legitimate purpose. So a rootkit is something that goes on your machine, modifies the heart of the operating system, so it's very hard to detect and very hard to remove. And the most common one of these is Find My iPhone, built into iOS by Apple. It is very hard to turn off. That was put there in response to an FBI request. About 5 years ago, the fastest growing theft in every district in America was iPhone theft. People would wear these earphones and people would mug them and steal their iPhones because that thing was worth a lot of money. All you had to do was wipe it clean and reuse it, and it was worth $50 or $100. So There was a huge movement, and the FBI, in response to political pressure, asked Apple, please make it so you can just cancel your iPhone like a credit card. So a stolen iPhone is worthless. So that's what they did. It has Find My iPhone on it. If you turn on Find My iPhone, then if somebody else gets your iPhone and you go report it stolen, it won't boot up at all. It'll say you have to put in your iCloud password or I'm not doing anything, and you can't even wipe it clean and reinstall the OS. You can't do anything but throw it in the trash without your iCloud password. And that's because a rootkit is blocking you. This is one built in by Apple, but there are malicious ones added by malware developers. You can also infect the firmware, which is the basic system used during the boot up process, and that's how jailbreak exploits work. So if you want to protect your device against rootkits, one strong defense is in almost all computers now is a trusted platform module. And the equivalent for an iPhone is called the secure element. They're in iPhones. They're supposedly the very best Androids have them now. I think the Galaxy Nexuses, the latest ones, but most of them don't. This is a cryptographic coprocessor. And what you do is you have the normal processor, which can see your memory, maybe 4 gigabytes, and it runs programs in memory. But the cryptographic coprocessor has its own memory that is not visible to the processor at all. And in that memory, you hide secrets, like cryptographic keys, and it can decrypt stuff, which the processor can then see, but the processor cannot see the key. It can just send a signal saying, please decrypt this stuff and let me know when it's done, and it does it. So even if someone steals your phone and takes it apart, they can't get the key. So now you can have cryptography that you can trust, that cannot be stolen by any app or malware. And therefore, you can have a cryptographic signature, which is verified by the TPM on the operating system. So when the operating system first boots up, before it boots up, it calculates the digital signature, which includes a hash value of that whole thing, and verifies it, and it won't boot up unless it is an authentic, unaltered operating system from the manufacturer, like Apple. iPhones do this, and some Windows PCs do this. And that means you could not have a rootkit in principle. It should be a very strong defense against rootkits. Anyway, what's much harder, of course, is hardware Trojans. This is something the US has been very concerned about for years. This is why they issued a dictum to us to please stop purchasing routers and switches from Huawei, the main Chinese manufacturer that makes the cheapest stuff and is very popular, because that stuff could have hardware Trojans in it. It could have it could all be under remote control for the Chinese government, and we'd never know, and they're afraid it is. I don't know if they have evidence that that really happened, but it certainly could happen, and there's no way to stop it. And that's the big issue of malicious insiders. How do you really know that your processor chip doesn't have extra functions that it shouldn't? There's no real way to audit it. And now we know from the Snowden dumps that the NSA totally does that. If they're targeting someone, they intercept their shipments of routers and alter them so that when you get your router, it has a special bug inside it to give them an extra copy of the data. You can totally do that at many different levels. You can do it at the design phase inside the chips, where it's essentially impossible to detect. You can also do it later by opening the box and implanting more hardware, which is how the NSA does it. It's also how thieves in Utah did it. They sold extra hardware and gas pumps to make a second copy of all the credit card numbers that went through and sent it by Wi-Fi to a nearby car. They did that to 158 gas stations in Utah for a long time before they got caught. It's certainly possible. You have some box and you don't really know what's in there. So that's the game. You can also compromise systems before purchase, and I mentioned LoJack. LoJack for laptops was an early version of what I think later became Find My iPhone. The LoJack was a third-party software you'd put on your phone, and I don't know if it's still out there. It might be there for Androids. That again is very difficult for the thief to detect and remove, and it tells people where your phone is. The one thing that these people don't like to talk about is after you find out where your phone is, so what? It's in that house. That doesn't give you the right to kick down the door and steal it back. So the only real value of this I can see is that if you actually just lost it, then maybe you'll get it back, or maybe you can offer a reward or something, but in general, knowing the physical location of the stolen object is only solving half of the problem as far as I can see. But anyway, there's the UEFI secure boot I mentioned. This is what protects Windows 8, and I should probably Windows 10. You can have a secure boot mode where it has a cryptographic check of the operating system every time it boots up. It checks the digital certificate, and if the operating system is not a genuine, unaltered Windows product, it won't boot. So if anybody tries to infect the operating system at its fundamental level with a rootkit, it will be detected, and that machine will not boot. It will tell you, I'm damaged, you have to fix it, don't trust it. So your embedded OSs. They are like children typically. They are vulnerable processes that you can't patch, vulnerable devices, so you have to put them in a safe container. So general principles: first, find out what embedded systems you have, decide how important they are, then limit who can get to them, put them behind VPNs on isolated subnets so that people have to prove some level of trust before they get at them instead of just letting the whole internet connect to them, and so on. Put on patches if you can, but the main thing you can do is this one here: restrict your network access. So instead of just connecting them straight to the internet, connect them to something that authenticates who's in there, and then even if they are vulnerable, you have some reason to believe that malicious attackers are not getting near them. So I got a few more eye clickers. Let's move this thing. There we go. Good. All right. So what happened in 1999? Quit at 30. All right, and that was Y2K, they called it. All right. The public perceived this as a waste of their time and the boy that cried wolf, complaining about something that didn't happen. People said airplanes would fall from the sky, elevators would stop, the water would fail, the power plants would go out, and none of that happened. So people said you were just making it up, but other people tell me that they really did put enormous effort into making sure that didn't happen, hiring tons of people that worked for a year behind the scenes, patching all this stuff, and that's why all those disasters didn't happen. Now, I don't know who's right, but anyway, it was all over the news, and then nothing much happened. A couple people got huge phone bills for like $1 million because it charged them for a 100-year-long phone call, but anyway. Which one of these protects you from rootkits? Quit at 30. All right, and that was trusted platform modules. By the way, that term is a Navy term. That was the Orange Book, which you go through in the CISSP, was the specifications for security for military devices, and it said you must have a trusted computing system that has these properties, and they added the trusted platform module in order to meet the military requirement for a trusted computing system. So that's where most of this stuff comes from. Most security starts at the military. They've been doing this for a long time. The civilian people got into it later, after they discovered, unfortunately, that the cops and the government are not protecting your cyber infrastructure the way they're protecting your physical infrastructure, so you have to actually have your own security team, which is pretty bad, but it's job security for all of us. Anyway, all right. What malware was a deliberate attack against an Iranian nuclear isotope separator? At some time, this was one of those open secrets like China hacking everybody, where everybody knew it, but they hadn't officially admitted it. I think they've now officially admitted it. All right, and that was Stuxnet. All right. And what are the systems that control power plants and airplane control towers? I'll quit at 30. All right, and those are SCADA systems. There's also another acronym you see in this space is ICS, Industrial Control System. All right, let me stop this recording. You'll see who won the iClickers. Then I'll go up to the lab, of course, and help anybody that wants help up there. 123.